Frenemy foreign policy, President Obama authorized logistical and intelligence support to Saudi Arabia as they bomb the Iranian-led rebels in Yemen today. But at the same time, the U.S. supports Iran-led forces in Tikrit against ISIS. Now, meanwhile, according to a new report, files held by Yemeni security forces containing details of American intelligence operations in the country that expose names of confidential informants have in fact been stolen by Iranian-backed militia leaders. Here now with reaction is former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State and Fox News contributor Liz Cheney, and also with us is Fox News contributor Stephen Hayes. All right, to put this together, Liz, you really have to follow the bouncing ball because it doesn't make sense. You've got an Iranian proxy war going on against Israel almost continually as they support Hezbollah and other groups. You've got the Iranian mullah this past Sunday chanting death to America. Now we've got a proxy war against Saudi Arabia and other countries by Iranian-supported rebels in Yemen, and then an administration that wants to allow them in the out years of this deal, the sunset years, a nuclear weapon. Help me understand the logic behind this, if there even is such a thing.
Well, the big picture truth here is that everything that you see happening right now, really across the Middle East, is directly traceable back to two things. One of those is the American withdrawal from Iraq, which created ISIS, the American withdrawal from Afghanistan, which even though it's been slowed now, has not been slowed sufficiently. That's one thing. The second thing is our nuclear talks with Iran. And it is absolutely the case that the United States under President Obama is undergoing an historic and devastating realignment of our interests so that the president is now aligning America with Iran. Now, the very kind of minor support and assistance you see to Saudi Arabia at this point is really, I would say, just symbolic, but it is not the kind of support we should be giving the Saudis. You have a situation where we have totally turned our back on Israel. We've turned our back on our Gulf Arab allies. They all know that, and they are all watching us now, walk down this path of additional dangerous concessions towards an agreement that will enable the Iranians to have a nuclear weapon. And the Saudis are doing the right thing. Yeah. They've got a very real concern about what's happening in Yemen. You know,
Steve, there's a good piece by Max Boot in the Wall Street Journal today where he suggests that the Obama doctrine is that the U.S. is withdrawing off the world stage and allowing the Iranians to take over. You know, you watch the Jordanians and the Egyptians and now even the Saudis, they're battling the terrorist forces in their region as we have, as Liz pointed out, retreated. This is a dramatic shift, and it doesn't sound good to me. What's your analysis of it?
No, I think that's right, and I agree with what Liz said. I mean, if you look back at the way that the president has handled Iran from the very beginning of his administration, remember he wrote a letter to the Supreme Leader back in the spring of 2009.
Well, he said they're not a threat in 2008. It's Iran, Cuba, right. These countries are tiny. Remember that?
Yeah, and then you go forward from there, and in 2009, I think the fall of 2009 was an important milestone because we discovered a secret nuclear facility in Qom in Iran, and rather than use that as a way to suggest that Iran wasn't going to make good on any of its promises, any of its obligations under previous UN Security Council resolutions, the president and his advisors said that this was an opportunity for Iran to rejoin the community of civilized nations. And then you go back to the last fall, to the fall of 2014, and the president wrote this letter, again, to the Supreme Leader, and according to the Wall Street Journal, he said, in effect, we're not going to mess with your client in Syria. We're not going to target Bashar Assad. We're not going to target the security forces, and we want to potentially help being on the same side in this battle against ISIS. That is basically a green light for Iran's regional aggression, and we've seen them go forward from that point.
Liz, I see very profound, long-standing a shift in the geopolitical makeup of the world, even for many decades to come as a result of this. I mean, we have a president that wants to give the Iranians nuclear weapons in spite of their threats to the United States, death to America, wipe Israel off the map, a pathological hatred towards Prime Minister Netanyahu in Israel, and yet the Jordanians and Egyptians, when they face terror, they fight it with a fierceness. And our president hears about the beheading of one American, and 30 seconds later he's on a golf course.
Right.
So when you put all of that together, what is this going to look like in 2 years?
Well, it is hard to overstate how dangerous it is and how dangerous it's going to be in a couple of years from now. You know, you have a situation where the president is not only willing to make whatever concessions are necessary. You know, at first we were going to not allow the Iranians to maintain any centrifuges. Now it looks like they're going to be able to continue spinning up to 6,000 and maybe more. Any negotiation, any concessions necessary at the negotiating table. But on top of that, what also seems to be happening is that he is so desperate for a deal with Iran that he's also willing to align our interests with theirs across the region. And if you look at what's happening in Yemen, if you look at the fact that you've now got a situation where the Iranians have significant control in Baghdad, significant control exactly into Crete, significant control in Lebanon through Hezbollah. And when the Iranians go into these places, if you'll notice, they don't go in and set up an alternative government. They go in and they just sow complete chaos. They support terror. They advance terror. You can't make up how bad this is for the nation.
I agree with all of that. And Steve, I'll ask you one final question. So in the out years, sunset years, we're going to give the Iranians nukes. As Liz pointed out, they'll spin 6,000 centrifuges in the meantime, have the ability to enrich uranium, and then ultimately build a bomb. Why would any president allow Iranian mullahs to do that, especially in light of their comments this weekend, death to America?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's crazy. You've seen the administration from the very beginning say that they wanted to decouple these nuclear talks with the broader set of Iran's troubling behavior. And the problem is now they're no longer decoupling this. As I said, with the president saying what he said about not interfering with Iran's client in Syria, to siding with Iran, de facto alliance with Iran in Iraq, we are including these things, and it's not headed in the right direction.
All right, guys, thank you for being with us.